Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we are revisiting the Blue-Red Artifacts archetype, which picked up a bunch of new tools in Marvel superheroes, namely the HYDRA Assault Robot, a 2-mana 1/3 artifact creature, saying whenever another villain or artifact we control enters, it deals 1 damage to target opponent. So we've seen effects like this in the past on cards like Reckless Fireweaver, but the Fireweaver is not an artifact itself, so that's a huge improvement here, since the HYDRA Assault Robot also triggers of other copies, and being an artifact creature has a lot of useful advantages in this deck, such as triggering our various token makers, like the Ravenous Robots and Pinnacle Emissary. The robots making a 1/1 that can block, whereas the Emissary makes 1/1 drones with flying that can only block creatures with flying, but these are both excellent token makers that will in turn also trigger the Assault Robot, since every token will ping the opponent for 1 as well. And then the goal is usually to go as wide as possible to set up some of our payoffs, such as a new Armor Wars, a 4-mana saga, lets us draw a card on Chapter 1 for each artifact we control. If we do, our opponent also gets to draw 1 card in return, but if we have some of these token makers in play, we could easily be drawing a fresh 7 of Armor Wars, which then also sets up Chapter 2, where we can now discount our artifact spells by 1, and there's a bunch of artifacts we can play for free that way, and that can also easily then set up our Assault Robot to ping the opponent for a ton of damage. At 1 mana, we've got Ginger Brute as a 1/1 with haste, can also make it hard to block. Then a Soul Guide Lantern can exile a card from graveyard when it enters, and can later still be sacrificed to exile the opponent's graveyard, so this is very important against any of the superior Spider-Man Reanimator decks, but it's still a cheap artifact to enable our various synergies, so we don't really mind having it around, and can always sacrifice it later to draw a card as well. And then Springleaf Drum is arguably the most important card in the deck, since it helps speed things up quite a bit, as we can now tap an untapped creature to make a mana of any color, so this will make it a lot easier to quickly empty our hands, make lots of tokens with the Ravenous Robots, or even a Warped Emissary can still be tapped with the Springleaf Drum. And then of course, the wider we go, the better our various synergies become, including the 2-mana Improvised Arsenal, which is basically a Cranial Plating, 2 mana to play, 1 to equip, to give +1 power for each artifact we control, so that's another payoff for going wide with a bunch of tokens, to then power up some of our evasive creatures, maybe the flying tokens from Emissary, or the Ginger Brute if we activate it, as well as the full set of Fugitive Droid, which can become unblockable if another artifact entered under our control, can occasionally also sacrifice it to counter a spell that targets an artifact or creature we control. Especially nice if you can snipe a Jeskai Revelation with it if the opponent's not paying attention to what they're targeting, but more realistically can also just counter an opposing spot removal spell that could otherwise go after some of our more important creatures, like our various token makers or the Assault Robot. And then topping off our curve, we have 1 affinity card left over. I used to have a few more in the deck, but now we still have the full set of Krang Mastermind, which ideally wants to be played when we don't have any other cards in hand, so we get to draw 4. And then its power also scales with the number of artifacts we control, but usually we're happy to just trade this off for opposing creatures or soak up a removal spell. It's the card advantage that really matters, and then we can hopefully still take over with some of our other finishers. And then our mana base also picked up a nice new land in Castle Doom, which can be used to make mana of any color to cast artifact spells, so that's perfect here. And we can also pay 3 mana, tap it, and sacrifice an artifact to make a 3/3 robot artifact token, so that can maybe upgrade some of our weaker 1/1 tokens or random artifacts that we no longer need into a 3/3 creature, so very helpful against control. And then Fomori Vault can also maybe discard extra lands we don't need to dig for additional artifacts and put those into our hand. And then plenty of blue-red dual lands, couple basics, could even play more basics if we're worried about some of the land destruction decks. Maybe don't need Fomori Vault as much then. But yeah, for now, let's jump in some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Do I save the droid until after I play the robots is the question, facing blue-red. Could be missing out on some damage. Yeah, I think I'll play it. We've got enough cheap artifacts to maybe play later. So, is it? Not sure which variety. Probably don't want to play the robots, could however warp the Emissary. And then still get an extra token out of it. Maybe go for the Lantern to diversify. Our opponent has the counterspell. So this may be a lesson deck after all. Yeah, I guess we'll play the Droid, don't expect a sweeper necessarily. And then next turn robots into Lantern, exile a lesson can be relevant. As we see the accumulate wisdom. Alright, so Coast is clear to at least make a token. Triggers on cast, so even if they firebending lesson the robots, I'll still get a token. Great Hall points towards the Jeskai builds, which also has the Jeskai Revelation at the top of the curve. So that could be a problem. Still gonna go for Lantern to maybe shut down another Accumulate Wisdom. Hit you for 2. I might see a firebending lesson on the robots. Not sure if they're packing sweepers, hopefully they don't. Tablet makes sense. Mill the lanes, which they can still play. And yeah, next turn they can already threaten Jeskai Revelation. If they target my creature, I can actually counter it with a droid. But they could avoid doing so. And there's Gran, actually a decent blocker here, given all my 1/1s. And they still had a technique. Okay, so let's see here. I drew a land. I think I wait on Krang. I guess I could go droid into Krang, draw 4. That is tempting. They still need a land to cast a Revelation, so there's a small chance that they have one in hand but aren't able to cast it yet. Otherwise we can maybe catch them with a droid. It's a close call. Either way I can now hit for 2. Yeah, I think I go for Krang, but could be a mistake. Armor Wars is nice. So at least we've got a plan to potentially win a longer game still. Alright, it's going to be another tablet, so dodged the Jeskai Revelation so far at least. Opponent mills another lane, so they got some value out of those tablets. Still only 2 lessons for Gran. And then a flashback for Combustion Technique, so they're kind of baiting me into using the Lantern. I mean, I can let them cast the technique. And then if they target Krang, I can still exile their graveyard in response. Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a weird play. Because right now, Combustion Technique, 2 plus number of lessons in the graveyard. So that would only be dealing 3 damage. Alright, they do have an Abandoned Attachments as well. So that will now enable Gran. Discards a death to our enemies. Alright, so then now I guess we can exile their graveyard. So Krang is safe. Could have also maybe responded to them casting the other spell to exile the technique, but then I guess they could have casted in response. Either way, we could now play Armor Wars with a mana left for Fugitive Droid. Or if I want to be greedy, I can go for Fugitive Droid into Armor Wars. So I can also attack with the droids, but I maybe get owned by Jeskai Revelation that way. You know what, I think we can beat a Jeskai Revelation at this point, since I'll get to draw a million cards. And these are all unblockable. Opponent's got 1 firebending lesson, that's fine. And yeah, now with double arsenal that we can suit up our unblockable Fugitive Droid with, we should be a-okay. And with a discount, Gingerbrute is free. So I can play 1 mana robot, a bunch of free Gingerbrutes to ping the opponent, and then still go arsenal equip. Yeah, Armor Wars has been impressive. Don't necessarily want to draw multiples, but at the right time, it can completely take over a game. Alright, could double block Rain Grain. Fine if they use a removal spell here, they don't. And Springleaf Drum is basically free mana here. Oh yes. Deal 1, deal 1, deal 1, deal another 1. And how about a nice cranial plating, basically. Suit up my unblockable droid. And oh, by the way, we've got another one. Can suit it up, still leave the droid's ability available for what it's worth. And yeah, this is more than enough. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. This hand is so close to being good. And with a second land, I think I would have kept. With double robots, double emissary, going wide for armor wars. But if we never get to 4 mana, I'm not going to be able to cast it, so... Painful Mulligan. This one's better. Quite similar to our last hand, except we've got lands to cast our spells. And then I'm tempted to still get rid of a land here, because we have the Springleaf Drum. So then turn 2 can go robots plus emissary, or emissary into robots. Depends if we prefer a 1-1 that can block, or a 1-1 flyer that cannot block. Against the green deck I probably want a blocker. Could also just play the Ginger Brute, to be fair. Yeah, that might be fine too. And then especially if I draw another cheap artifact, we get to make even more tokens, or with a land set up the armor wars already. Opponent on maybe a landfall with the Earthbender Ascension. Trample's going to be a problem, because while we can chump, if their creature tramples, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I think armor wars could be the move, or I can still play the emissary, get an extra token out of it first, which would be 2 more cards. But we already get to draw 4, which seems pretty decent. And then next turn get to discount. It's close. Maybe I will actually still cast Emissary first. And then just attack. Can also use the robots to give tokens haste, but would not have been particularly helpful here. Alright, so we've got a nice leftover here. Another Springleaf Drum first would even improve things, since we can make 2 more or 3 more artifacts and still cast this. Krang. Yeah, could be worth it. Also just puts a big body into play. Get to draw 3. And yeah, those are pretty good. So I can go a Ravenous into Springleaf to maximize my tokens. And we may not even need the Armor Wars, but it's a nice leftover. So yeah, now giving tokens haste could actually be reasonable. Maybe should not have tapped Drone. So can tap another Robots, which is not blocking. And then the Flyers can attack. And can probably send in all the 1/1 ground troops as well. Still have a couple blockers. Alternatively, could have given Ginger Brute its evasive ability. Although I guess the forest does have haste, so it can still block a Ginger Brute. But yeah, sadly don't get to play the Armor Wars, our opponent is already dead. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with promising hands. An extra land or a Springleaf Drum would be great. For now, Ginger Brute into an Assault Robot. The arsenal could be good once we go wide, but I think for now it's the robots, and then, yeah, ideally with the lands I get to warp the emissary, play another robots. Opponent blue-green. Passes it back. Did draw the land. So, what are we thinking? Could have a counterspell up, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, still down to warp the emissary. Seems like a fine starting point. Our opponent's gonna Quandrix Charm counter unless we pay 2. Alright, could have played around it, but now we get to resolve the second robot instead. And then improvised arsenal. Can maybe equip Ginger Brute. So it's a Teamer color to deck. I see a Teamer Battlecrier deck. Sparbluff does enter tapped, but that's okay. So opponent's probably not interested in trading, but on the off chance that they do, probably want to keep their robots alive. Alright, they actually trade, because a Battlecrier can be a combo piece that wins out of nowhere. Curator can offer some graveyard hate. Alright, Armor Wards, draw 3. Seems fine. And play tapped Sparbluff. So then a robot into Krang. Not too concerned about the Curator. And then next turn we get the 1 mana discount as well. Opponent with an Herbalist. And get to untap. Possible they have another Quandrix Charm up here. So Krang for 3 mana can still pay for a conditional counterspell. And then we still have the arsenal to equip. But yeah, we could just win right now if we find another artifact. And yeah, opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw here with a keepable hand. Some cheap evasive creatures with arsenal. And then Krang to maybe refuel. Facing red-black. Start maybe with a Ginger Brute. A droid could be more useful later if this gets answered. And a Burst Lightning. So out of black, red. Alright, Iron Shield Elf. So it's the Mardu discard deck. Alright, Ravenous Robots has the most upside if it survives. They already used a Burst Lightning. Their deck typically doesn't have a ton of answers. So I'll give this a shot. Safer would be to just play Arsenal and then next turn go Robots plus Droid. But we might get an extra token out of it. Cool but rude. Especially scary on level 2 with the Elf. Discards a Bloodghast, can get it back next turn. And it's going to be the Shark next. Okay, so Robots survives. So Droid plus Arsenal. Make some blockers, which can also maybe hold off the Elf. And no attacks for now. The Elf will discard another Bloodghast. At least we're still at 17, so they won't have haste. And a Moonshadow. Opponent levels up to level 2, so now they get to deal damage when discarding. And they get a Practice Defense in the graveyard. So especially if they have a land and then next turn Practice Defense, I could be dead. Yeah, I guess I'll force them to save the Elf by discarding a card. Can still play a 4 mana Krang. If they drew into a land, now they have to decide between saving the elf or getting back Bloodghast. And they're actually gonna let the elf go. Okay, so play a land, can make it Fomori Vaults. Play Krang. Alright, not the most exciting draws. Get in with the droid. So the plan might be Arsenal on the droid to make it unblockable. Especially if we draw another cheap artifact, we could make some more tokens with Emissary. Opponent's actually leveling up once more, so they get to tutor up a card, discard at random. So either they got some removal, or maybe they want to land. Possible they searched up the Erode, but now got rid of it. I'll trade Krang for the Mako. Moonshadow grows, so I'll need my 2 blockers. But yeah, now Bloodghast could have haste. That's another lane to draw, unfortunately. So, now what's my plan? 3 mana for Fomori Vault, so that's probably not happening. Can just cast the Emissary, and then still equip the Arsenal. Yeah, it's not great. So it's an attack for 8. Something like a Springleaf Drum could have made a huge difference, not only in drawing more with Krang earlier, but also making more tokens. Second cool but root, so they're still not going for offense, and they apparently haven't found a land for Bloodghast. So I may still survive. So another cool but root trigger. So have to pretty much double block here. Sweet. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Springleaf Drum, secretly the best card in the deck. Can play turn 1, turn 2 Warp Emissary, play Ginger Brute, start going wide for the Arsenal. And another Emissary is nice. Opponent does have a nice start with turn 1 Elves. We'll see what the follow-up looks like. Mono green with a turn 2 Cub, so could be dead on turn 3. Anything else? No second Cub, at least, it seems. And it's gonna be a Chocobo, so it is still the landfall deck. Okay. So then I'm looking at double warped Emissary into Gingerbrute. Opponent also had the Augmenter left. Stick to the plan. Warp, Gingerbrute. Go wide. And then Gingerbrute with an Arsenal could do some damage. The flying tokens, of course, as well. Because, yeah, the Earthbounded lands do have haste, so they can still block the Gingerbrute after we use its ability. Against these green decks, we sometimes prefer having the Ravenous robots to actually help block some larger ground creatures. Because right now it is kind of a pure race. If they slam down an Ouroboros, we're still in trouble. Alright, it's going to be the Ice still, no fetch lane to go with it. Now they do. So then the Chocobo is going to be a pretty big threat. But they are on empty, no cards in hand. Escape Tunnel can also make things unblockable for what it's worth. Alright, big attack. Do I trade Gingerbrute for Llanowar Elves? I think I don't, and then the plan being, can play Arsenal, suit up one of the drones, attack, and then move the Arsenal back to Gingerbrute to trade for, let's say, the Chocobo or some other creature. Does Droid change the equation? Can be an unblockable creature, but flying should suffice. So, Yeah, kind of liking this plan, where we arsenal equip. So then I can only attack with 2 droids or drones, because I need the other one to equip the Ginger Brute with Springleaf Drum. Okay, so I've got a 7-1 on defense. Hopefully that's enough. So then a second arsenal could maybe present lethal. Opponent mills Serac. Plays an untapped forest instead of replaying the escape tunnel, because they have an Ouroboros as well. Yeah, that was a good top deck. So if I block Chocobo, it's just a chum block. 7, 10, and then I'm still dead. Yep, that's Ouroboros for you. But of course the Elf plus Banter Mole start gave them a lot of mana to begin with. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Turn 2 robots versus Assault Robot. Depending on the matchup, if we suspect removal, maybe want to save this to go wide for Armor Wars. Either way, I will be saving the droid for later to get some extra triggers. Alright, opponent on maybe a life gain deck. Could be a tough matchup if our opponent stacks up some big life linkers. But hopefully they don't have Sheltered by Ghosts right away, and we get to have some fun with our tokens. Deep Cavern Bat, so this is actually a black life gain deck. And yeah, I do not have removal, so whatever they take they get to keep. So I'm glad they didn't take the Armor Wars actually. And Krang's not bad either. So hoping for something like a Springleaf Drum would be excellent. Now the droid can protect the robots. And now an Essence Channeler is going to get pretty large. Pinnacle Emissary could be decent, making blockers for the Deep Cavern Bat. Actually found a Springleaf. So play that. And then I'm thinking Krang before Armor Wars, even though Armor Wars already draws 5 here. Krang just puts a pretty big body into play, can still maybe cast a 1-drop after. Okay, so Ginger Brute still looks good, unless we want to keep up Fugitive Droid. This only counters spells, but not abilities, so if they have Sheltered by Ghosts, then I can't really stop it. So I may as well get another token out of it. Professor Delian fell. Goes after Krang, that's fine. Take 5 in the air, Channeler grows. But this Armor Wars is looking quite promising. Opponent draws 1, I get to draw 8. Seems fair. Okay, so we can string together some copies of Springleaf Drum. And then the Arsenal's a real payoff here. Paired with a Fugitive Droid, can just end the game next turn. One mana short of equipping it, but next turn with a discount I guess it becomes trivial. So for now play a Lantern. Actually I should play the Arsenal, just so they can't play a bunch more Deep Cavern Bats to take them all away. However, unlikely. And then can go after Professor. Maybe just make sure we take it out here. Okay, so then one more will connect. Still have some blockers back. Opponent lets it go. They could have blocked. Alright, so at 14, just need to survive one turn. Starscape will drain us for a bunch. And we get a chance to block the channeler. Okay, so double arsenal is going to be more than enough. Artifacts get a 1 mana discount, so we can play even more of them for free. Play Arsenal. And suit up the Fugitive Droid. Opponent's tapped out, otherwise we could use the droid for protection, make the Ginger Brute unblockable, since our opponent doesn't have any haste creatures. But that'll do it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Got some token makers and hopefully get to see the Armor Wars in action. We'll wait on casting my 1-drops. Hopefully get the robots established first. Opponent blue-white. Is it control? Is it maybe the artifact deck? In which case Pinnacle Starcage is a problem. Ooh, High Noon is also a problem. Alright, so I won't be able to double spell. Well, hopefully the robots can stick around and we can just play our spells one at a time. So regretting not playing a droid on turn 1 now. Yeah, I mean, Springleaf is awesome, but not when there's a High Noon on the battlefield. So, possible they have like a No More Lies in hand to counter my next play. So I don't want to make it anything too powerful. Let's go with the Fugitive Droid. Still good to have him play when paired with Arsenal. Alright, opponent's got Wondrous Wasp. So my creature loses all abilities. Yeah, that's too bad. So our robots is shut down. So our opponent, a blue-white flash kind of prison deck with High Noon. They might have Voice of Victory. And yeah, the Wondrous Wasp definitely stood out as a constructed playable card in the previews. And yep, this is similar to Voice of Victory. Not that I was casting spells in the opponent's turn. They still have 2 mana up, so they likely still have a counterspell available. I guess we'll cast Emissary and find out. Yep. It's the new counterspell with Teamwork. So don't have a good attack. I mean, Arsenal can still maybe make something happen, but yeah, this High Noon is the real problem. Because our deck wants to be able to cast a whole bunch of spells on the cheap. So how long can I keep this up? Still gonna try the Emissary again. Maybe someday a spell will resolve. Even Interrupter says no. Yeah, this seems like a tough matchup if they get their combo pieces in play. Without a High Noon, I think we would have been fine, since we can just cast multiple cheap spells in the same turn. They can only counter so many of them. Castle Doom does give us an alternate plan of making tokens instead of running into their counter spells, but I don't think that's going to be enough. So I'll still try the Emissary. Can pay for No More Lies. Opponent's got a Conductor, which can maybe flicker the Interrupter, but not with their own High Noon in play. They cannot double spell. So they maybe should have played this in their own turn. But we're also dying to the Flyers, which is why I wanted to get the Emissary going. But yeah, whatever I play next could get interrupted. That's sad. I still get a cast trigger. So then, yeah, I guess Arsenal has the most upside. Has to be an artifact. Yeah, opponent's gonna interrupt it. Otherwise we could have maybe suited up the droid, attacked, and then moved the equipment onto the drone token to trade for one of their flyers. Yeah, we just ran into a bad matchup. That'll happen. So I can still block the Wondrous Wasp, take 4 as it stands, but they also have a Restless Anchorage, so if they notice, we are just dead on board. Alright, GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. Got our Spring Leaf and 2 token makers. So, start there. And then, ideally, find some more payoffs, whether it's Krang, the Armor Wars, or even the robot to ping the opponent. So against turn 1 planes, I think we go Ravenous into Droid. And then next turn I can maybe warp the Emissary. And make more tokens. Alright, it is a hero deck. And actually found the Armor Wars, that's excellent. So now I'm fine just casting the Emissary instead of warping it. And gearing up for the Armor Wars next turn to completely go bananas. And I'm actually offering the trade for Ravenous Robots, even though it is quite valuable. Opponent takes it. So how about a 4 mana draw? Is it 9? Wow. It's a lot of cards. Opponent gets to draw 1 measly card. They do have hexproof, but they still get to draw here, I believe, since it doesn't target them. And that's quite the hand. Next turn we get a 1 mana discount. For now, I guess I can play Fugitive Droid, but it's mostly the Arsenal that'll end the game for us next turn. Even found a backup Armor Wars. It usually doesn't get to Chapter 3, I'll tell you that much. So these get to attack. Does Chapter 3 target our opponent? And deals X damage to target opponent, so then with Captain America I won't actually be able to target them. But that's okay. The HYDRA Assault Robot also targets our opponent, so... yeah, I guess Captain America does have some nice counterplay to the villains from the set. So the only card I'm worried about is an Erode, but since we have Fugitive Droid, we can counter that as well. So yeah, opponent should be very much dead. Somewhat tempting to draw a million more cards with Armor Wars. But yeah, opponent scoops it up. It's mostly the Arsenal equipped onto a droid that'll cross the finish line for us. Sweet. Okay, we're on the play with keepable hands, especially against graveyard decks. We're happy with a Lantern. I will actually save my 1-drops until after I play Ravenous Robots or Emissary. Opponent blue-white. So they could easily have a Spell Snare up here, would explain the untapped Shockland. So then I'm less interested in playing the Ravenous Robots this turn. And I think I'll go Emissary plus Ginger Brute instead. Yeah, if they weren't representing removal or Spell Snare, I would have gone for robots. They might actually have an Erode in hand instead, since it was holding priority with Emissary on the battlefield. So yeah, Erode is fine. Opponent's gonna hang on to it for now. It's gonna pass it back. Springleaf is exciting. So, Ravenous Robots into Springleaf would be a good starting point. We'll see if they have a counterspell now. So far so good. They might erode the robots now. Let's go with Soul Guide Lantern on the off chance that they're gonna wipe my board. Can keep an extra creature in hand. And then attack. Are we afraid of any flash creatures? I don't think so. Alright, Drowner, that's still a trade. So it's not quite control, it's more of a tempo deck. They could try and get rid of the robots by shuffling the Drowner, but they're just gonna take the trade for Gingerbrute. So our equipment would be a great draw. Something like Krang we can cast on the cheap. And then our Saga, assuming we can resolve it. For now, just a land. So, yeah, I guess Emissary into Gingerbrute is fine. Can still sack the Lantern. Opponent has an Aven Interrupter. That's fine. Can recast it next turn, make another token of Ravenous Robots. Do I hold the Gingerbrute? I think I do. So we've got more triggers coming up. And then just sack the Lantern. Could wait, I suppose. No attacks. Could get punished if they run out of High Noon, and I wouldn't be able to double spell anymore. Because this looks like that type of deck. Interrupter attacks. Is this an Avatar's Wrath, perhaps? That would make sense. I'll still take it here. Yep. Okay, so do I want to sack the Lantern? I guess I do. Alright, the Assault Robot could be nice. So I'm unable to cast any cards that got airbended because of the Wrath. But I can go with the Assault Robots. And then still tempted to hold the Gingerbrute for next turn. Yeah, the Wrath was effective, dealt with all our tokens. And Jennifer prevents us from casting spells in the opponent's turn, that's fine. And another Assault Robot. So step 1, play Emissary, while it's still free. Opponent's gonna interrupt. So now this costs 4. So then I can still play Assault Robots into Ravenous Robots, or the other way around. So we're on the burn plan. So next turn we can try Emissary again, and then still have a Gingerbrute for more damage. Okay. And they do now finally erode. Yeah, they had that in hand for a while, it seems. And Jennifer's gonna reconsider. Still have Castle Doom that we can also activate here. Start with Emissary, probably gets answered. Yep. So now it's gonna cost 4 mana with double Emissary. But I think it's time for Gingerbrute. And then I can pay a mana to activate Gingerbrute. Attack, unopposed. And then still use Castle Doom on my token. Could also go for Springleaf Drum, maybe that's better. Make a 3/3, which deals 2 more damage. So our opponent's falling behind on board. So then next turn I can make another 3/3, deal 2. And they need to deal with what's in play, and our opponent scoops it up. So yeah, we got our rematch against the High Noon deck, this time without a namesake card. Alright, we're on the draw. This hand's a little on the clunky side. Do have double robot and emissary to maybe make some tokens, but it will be a bit slow to get going. I think we still try it. And then as always, looking for Springleaf Drum. Opponent does have the turn 1 elves. So robots into emissary plus robot. A Spinner of Souls is not a typical inclusion. Now if I draw a 1-drop, I would prefer going emissary, droid plus another 1-drop instead. Set up Krang and a second spinner. Well, I'm not going to be destroying their creatures, so they won't have an easy time enabling those. Alright, so since we did not draw a 1-drop, do I go Assault Robots after warping Emissary? I think I do. Could also cast the Emissary, but they can still attack into it with a spinner. So then 3 artifacts in play as the dust settles, meaning I'm still not quite in a position to play Krang. I'm gonna take another 8 damage, so yeah, it's not looking great. Need to find our equipment. Springleaf Drum would have been decent. Now I guess we go Emissary into the droid, and then next turn we've got Krang. Probably have to trade the Emissary in the meantime. And we were also lucky that our opponent didn't keep up the pressure here, as opposed to committing more creatures to the board. We are dealing a good amount of damage with the robots, however, so that adds up. Yeah, I wish these were the tokens that could block. Alright, and now an Ouroboros. That's always a game ender. Opponent does not attack. That feels like a mistake. They might come to regret that. Drew a Springleaf Drum and get to ping them for a bunch more. Play a land before playing Krang. So as long as we find any artifact, our opponent's just dead here. Can go Springleaf into another droid and burn them out. But yeah, if our opponents got a bit more aggressive with the spinners, this game might have looked a little bit different, since we maybe have to chump with some of our enablers. And then, yeah, opponent can probably go the distance with Ouroboros. So yeah, we got to see this new and improved version of blue-red artifacts in action. The HYDRA Assault Robot definitely delivered as a nice alternate win condition that naturally complements all the artifact token makers in the deck. And then the Armor Wars was also quite exciting, often drawing us a fresh new hand, as well as discounting our spells on the following turn. Although I will caution against running a full playset of Armor Wars, otherwise you end up maybe with too many clunky hands with a bunch of 4-mana enchantments without the cheap artifacts to enable them. But I could maybe see a 3-and-3 split with Armor Wars and Krang, since they offer something pretty similar. That being said, the archetype still struggles against some of the more popular best-of-1 strategies. Any opponent going turn 1 Lenora Elves, turn 2 Badger Molcub is going to have a pretty big advantage, since we don't have removal to slow them down. The card Sheltered by Ghosts is also quite punishing against a deck that doesn't have any removal, since they can just exile our best permanent, and then the lifelink is also relevant when we're trying to burn them out. So yeah, all those cards are problematic, but of course we can still have a great draw that can ignore those and then still go over the top. So that's also where the explosiveness of a Springleaf Drum can make a huge difference. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.